Well, good afternoon. This is Hound Dog Steve here, and this is my trip home from Peterborough. And whilst I'm driving, I thought I'd share a few thoughts with you over the situation which is taking place in China and around the world. There has been some absolutely incredible information coming out now about this flu, COVID-19 they're calling it. But there have been people who've been transmitting this through drain pipes. There was one woman caught it in an apartment building, and she was apparently 10 stories above the infected person, and somehow it got into her apartment, and they figured that it was going up the drain pipes. So this is a startling confirmation that this is now airborne. Also, the incubation time has gone from 7 days to 14 to 24, and now there was a woman who has been 42 days back from Wuhan, and she's only just now started showing symptoms of the flu. So 42 days puts us into incredible territory, because the whole time, you are infected, you are contagious, you are able to spread this through droplets, saliva, and now, as we said, through the air, aerosols, that kind of stuff. And so who knows how far you could travel and what surfaces you could touch in 42 days. And there is a video I saw the other day, and this was the fogging of the streets, and they had these huge trucks just pouring out some kind of, I'm assuming, disinfectant. But when you think that we're looking at Wuhan is a city of 8 million people, I believe, and this is like trying to fumigate New York. I mean, the task is virtually impossible to do thoroughly. I don't know whether this is just a last ditch to give the public confidence that something at least is being done, but this is rampaging all over the place. The story coming off the cruise ships is that there was originally one that went to 20, 60, and now there are, I believe, 136 people infected on a liner which is trapped off the coast of Japan. Now, aside from the terrible human tragedy that is unfolding here, and who knows where all this will lead to, whether it will continue its virulence in other countries, we just have to wait and see how that plays out. But in the meantime, just about 9 provinces in China are under lockdown. All of the ports, except for one, is in lockdown. That means that nothing is moving. People aren't showing up for work, factories aren't opening, the Baltic Dry Index has dropped down below 0 for the first time ever in its history. And now the Baltic Dry Index, for those who don't know, is basically the shipping trade carrying dry goods across the oceans between continents and countries and so on and so forth. And of course, the higher that number is, the more shipping, the more trade is going on, and you can see that you'd be having a good economy. However, when it is low, this means that there is no trading going on, and so to go below 0 for the first time is quite startling. And so even if there are any ships leaving China right now, what is happening when they're reaching their destination, they're not being allowed to come ashore to unload until all the crew have been tested. And so this is where the effects are really going to be felt. I mean, most of these ports in China, they're shipping 100,000 containers a week out of these ports, all filled with goods or parts going all over the world. And so it's not just the trade and manufacturing in China, it's the manufacturing that takes place in all the other countries in the world. A huge area that the Chinese are involved in is in the manufacturing of pharmaceuticals. And I'd heard a major about a year ago in the US say that if China really wanted to attack the USA, all they would have to do is stop delivering. When you think, for example, that 1 in 6 people in North America are taking an antidepressant or an antipsychotic, and you cannot just stop using those drugs overnight. You have to wean yourself off, that kind of stuff. There could be shortages. Who knows what might happen when people start going through withdrawal? What happens when you can't get antibiotics? There is no antibiotics manufactured in the USA at all. The last place closed down in 2002, I believe it was. So all the manufacture of antibiotics is now in China or India. And of course India gets a lot of its source materials from China. So, India is not going to be any real help at all in this situation. And so, you have to imagine that if the ports are backed up, the containers are backed up, the ships are not moving, and also, the ships that pulled in there, they don't just pull in empty, all of them. Some of them come in preloaded with some containers from other factories or ports or so on and so forth, and they're picking up just certain things in China. Well, now they're stuck, and all of those goods that were already on there are now stuck because nothing is moving. So you start backing up the factories, people not showing up for work, the factories start to shut down. Well, if you have, even at a 24-day quarantine, that's a 3-week quarantine, okay? And if you do get ill, quite a few people have to go into hospital because there are complications with the respiratory system, apparently. And so, these things are not going to come online very, very quickly. You're probably looking at least 2 months. That's if everything just suddenly miraculously stops at its tracks right now. You're probably still looking at 2 months to get everything back on those ships, moving around. But I think this is going to take a lot longer than 2 months. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the black swan of black swan events. There will be no country when this is finished that is left untouched by the effects of COVID-19. Now, the experts have come out in a recent study and suggested that 60% of the entire planet could be affected by this virus, actually get the virus. I mean, that, the Spanish flu was only 40%. Okay, so to have 60%, and I've heard as high as 80%, that means that between now and 3 years from now, every single one of us, just about 8 out of 10 people, are going to have had this virus. And I've also heard that you can get this virus more than once. Now, how true that is, because we're into speculation territory here, and you can't always believe all of your sources. There are so many different conflicting stories going on here, but certainly the raw video coming out of China now is quite disturbing. Mass arrests, people being moved off to quarantine areas where there is literally no medical facilities, instruments, drugs or whatever. And I saw one video where a chap actually was standing on the edge of this tent saying, once you're in, you ain't coming out. And so you're stuck. And so I'm sure there's a lot, word has passed around, and a lot of people are, going to be running away from this situation. They're going to go into hiding because, if you're going to get arrested, these people are getting dragged out of their homes. And so, this sets panic on the street. There is already enough panic as it is because, apparently people are collapsing in the street. And so, when you see that kind of stuff happening, that is pretty unnerving. And so even the well people are staying home, and hopefully they're well stocked. And I think that it is very prudent for everybody everywhere within hail of my voice should be thinking about stocking the larder a little bit so that you have, just in case, the reaction to this. We're seeing how countries are reacting. Planes have now been, they're now refusing people from China on their flights. Cruise ships will not be pulling into Asian ports until this is all over. So tourism is going to die over there. This is going to be so huge, it's unbelievable. And I think we're already at a point now where the negative knock-on effects are absolutely unavoidable. I mean, this has been going on virtually since, December. There was warnings of it by a doctor who has now died of this flu, and he was actually arrested. Can you believe that? He was actually arrested. He was told to admit that he was sending around false rumors and conspiracies, and that he was completely off base. And so there you go. You know, ever since December they've known about this. Well, here we are now into the 11th of February. So that, who knows where these people could have travelled. If it is a say a 24 to 42 day incubation period, it just staggers the mind. There is no way that any government can withstand this. Now, I don't know whether you knew, but after the Spanish flu, one of the biggest sort of secondary effects was that when it was all said and done, there just wasn't enough labour to run all of the equipment that was needed to keep the society happening. It was a very, very difficult time, and you know, we have so many intricate systems that need to be maintained. You know, if we get the flu go through North America, you know, a lot of our systems might not be working. Your cell phone might not be working. If things break, they might not be getting repaired. You know, these are all things that will have to be taken into consideration, you know, when you're stocking up a little bit. And you know, like I say, you can see the panic that's taking place out there on the street, and with governments now, with the quarantining and so on and so forth, and that, I believe, will spread. And so who knows what this looks like in, say, another month's time. But this is going to be a very, very difficult year for the planet. I am sure that we are now going to go into a recession. How that is going to affect the election, I have no idea. But if things continue the way they are, and it continues to stay on a razor's edge, I am assuming that you would want to stick with the person who is already in power. You don't want to have a transition of power during this event, and so you might find that this will play to keeping Donald Trump in office. So that might be an interesting side effect of this. The other side effect of this is online voting, or voting on your phone. And of course, as we just saw with the Iowa caucuses, wow, that app worked really, really well, didn't it? So there could be a lot of suspicion about voting. Maybe it can be hacked, maybe it can be fooled around with, who knows. You know, this year has now suddenly turned into who the heck knows what is going to happen. And it's kind of interesting. I was thinking the other day about Cliff High, because he's done actually a couple of really excellent videos just lately, but he did say that there would be a time when people would be living very hand to mouth. There wouldn't be the support systems, the industry, the mechanisms that basically kept the society running. He said the internet would still be running because people were making oh, no, sorry, that's the John Titor story. Oh, yes, Jason at 4. If you haven't heard the John Titor story, look up Jason at 4 on YouTube and go through his videos. It was a while ago now, but it's a very, very interesting story about the time traveller, John Titor. But no, Cliff High said that there would be very limited technology, and people would be living in much smaller communities, and also that there could potentially be 1 billion people die from some kind of illness. Now, those weren't, they were in different reports, but when you see what's unfolding now, maybe that's what they were talking about. Who knows? But definitely it's a very, very interesting year now coming up, and we will have to see how it all unfolds. There's already unrest on the street, you know, even when you go into, you know, the other countries around the world, you know, France, Spain, Catalonia, Hong Kong, and I'm sure that the flu in Hong Kong sounds like it's in lockdown. So everything is going to be topsy-turvy this year, and so you need to basically get a spiritual sense of yourself, because I think we're going to see a lot of the markers that hold society together are not going to be there anymore, and I think we depend on those markers a lot more than we think. And so we're going to be turning to our moral compass to help us decide how to move forward here, and that is why I think you should align yourself with, whether it be God, whether it is your spiritual belief, whether it's an energy, a Buddha, whatever it is. I think this is a good time to sit down and contemplate and think who you are as a person and what direction you're going, what your goals are, what your motivations are. And because you may find that life looks quite a bit different at the end of this year, and you may be depending a lot more on yourself for growing your own food. You may be depending on your neighbours a lot more for support and supporting your neighbours. We may not have extensive services like the police, like the army. Who knows how this virus is going to affect people? And if you're looking at 60 to 80% of your population getting a case of this flu, the opportunity for it to mutate again is huge. And so they haven't even contemplated that situation. But you could, for example, get somebody, an older person, gives it to their cat. The cat gives it to the parrot, and the parrot gives it to the grandchild. And there you go, in that interspecies jump. And I do understand that pets can get this virus. In that interspecies jump, you could definitely have a mutation. And what does that do? What does it do if your farmers are too sick to plant? I mean, this is not necessarily if it kills you, but if it just leaves you unable to work. Maybe if you have a respiratory problem, you can't go out and work on the fields and work hard if you can't breathe, if you have some kind of pneumonia type ailment. And here we are. This is actually the Curve Lake. This is a native Indian reserve, and they have gas stations here. And they give, this is the fairest place that I have ever been to that serves gas. Now you can't see the pump there, but the pump is 99 cents per litre, and for diesel, that is. I have a diesel Jetta, and if you go down into Peterborough, you are looking at about $1.21 per litre of diesel. And I quite often mention to people, you see, all fuels are bought on the NYMEX. When these big companies trade for the finished products like oil and gasoline and diesel and so on and so forth, and they're more often than not sold in 90-day futures. And those 90-day futures mean that you have a consistent price through the entire season. So it literally is not possible for gasoline to go up and down on a daily basis. And if you're going to a gas station that's doing that, if it goes up on a Thursday night and comes down on a Monday morning, my friend, you are being gouged big time. At this gas station here on the reserve, I find that it's about every 90 days you see a change in gas and diesel prices. And so they are sticking to, whatever's in the tank, that is the price of the gas or diesel. And when the new load arrives, when the 90 days is up, that's when the prices change. And so, yes, I go to places that deal fairly with their customers. And I've actually spoken to a few people behind the counter who I don't think were quite aware of that fact about the NYMEX and the 90-day futures that all commodities are bought in. Now you can buy 30 days and 60-day futures, of course, but they like that steady price for the entire season. They know what they're going to pay for their gasoline. So there you go. The other thing I've been thinking about, I do a lot of thinking whilst I'm driving, but it's about something that I was discussing with some friends the other day, and that is that Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, other social media platforms are being used instead of actually on the boots on the ground protesting or activist work, planting trees, well, whatever it is that you want to do, forming community, you can't do that behind a screen. You have to actually get out there and do it. You have to sit on a committee. I'm on the committee of the Bobcaygeon Farmers Market, and I also formed a group called Citizens for Direct Democracy. But how you form community is you interact with the people in your community. You play with them, you discuss things with them, you discuss things that are happening around you with them, and you formulate a plan as to how you're going to resolve the issues in your community. And for those people who might be feeling a little hopeless, might be feeling that the things that are going on in this world are kind of out of their control, do something in your community. You'll find that it will fill you with hope. Plant a garden. There is nothing more hopeful than planting a garden and watching a seed, a little tiny seed, grow into a plant and either give you pleasure with flower or give you sustenance with fruit and vegetables. These are all these kind of things. You have much more impact at a local level, and the effect that you have will in turn have an effect on you at the local level. So when you resolve parking issues in your village, when you come up with ideas as to how you can do things better, how you can do things more cheaply, whether you can find a committee to do something or form a committee, to do the things that you want to do within your village, this is far more powerful than any online posting that you can ever do. Yes, share what you're doing online, but make sure that that's what's happening, that you're sharing it online, and you're not just doing the online bit as if what a great idea to do this, and you're not actually being involved yourself. Because the situation that we're in right now with the pollution, with the way our societies are running, with the fact that people are retiring in greater numbers, that we don't have the young people to fill all of those positions, we are all going to be required to participate a lot more in our own community. And just as a house is built up of many small bricks, so a country is built up of many small communities. So what you do in your community, when you form a group to pick up the litter on a particular highway and go through your community one by one so that you live in a clean environment, that's powerful. That is a really powerful thing to do. Another couple of small things. Well, they seem small, but they are actually indeed very powerful indeed. And the first one is bank at a credit union. Do not go to one of the big banks, because the big banks take your money and they take it out of your community and they invest in things like mining, maybe factories overseas, real estate development overseas, things that might not be good for the communities overseas. Whereas when you put your money in a credit union is bound to use that money to create mortgages and business loans within your community. So once again, it's a way of helping your local businesses thrive in difficult times. The other thing that you can do is go to thrift stores more often. I love the idea of reusing things. Of all of the 3 R's, reusing is the best, because when you reuse something, you never have to put any extra energy in it. The initial energy that was used to create that thing, it's still being used. Whereas when you recycle something, and I'm not saying you shouldn't recycle, but when you recycle something, you usually have to convert that into something else. So more energy has to be put into that item. Whereas when you reuse something, no, you've already put the energy into that. So buying presents at thrift stores or vintage stores. I saw a documentary once called The Economics of Happiness, and it said that when you go to a big box store, for every $1 that you spend in that big box store, you export 80 cents out of your community. And when you shop locally, it's just exactly the reverse. You leave 80 cents in your community. And again, this is going to be interesting to see what happens to some of these big box stores, because, when you go through Walmart, for example, absolutely everything that they have in Walmart is made in China. Maybe 1% of the goods are made elsewhere. So Walmart is going to completely suffer. Amazon, I think, is going to get hammered. And this is actually going to play into local manufacturing, cottage industries, that kind of stuff. Maybe you might even see manufacturing come back to North America a little bit, because this is going to be not just a shock, but a warning of what might happen in the future. You know, I think people might be seriously rethinking their future plans as far as manufacturing is concerned. So, you know, this may turn out to be a good thing, who knows, but you're certainly looking at a rebalancing. And I, for one, am going to be absolutely fascinated to see how this all plays out. And please do make sure that you get yourself a few supplies. And in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant afternoon. And we'll talk very, very shortly. Okay, see you now. You take care. Bye.